What's going on? How are you?
Good, how are you? Hi,
You are
Suchita.
the happiest looking person for someone who has been under lockdown uh, almost a month now, which is amazing. No, but thank you so much for doing this with us.
No, it's my pleasure, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you because I'm being selfish about it as well. I'm looking forward to the questions and to learn from everyone.
No, absolutely. I think this is probably the session that sold out the fastest.
You're
So in
kind.
like record time, we had about 150 odd signups, and we obviously had to cap at 100. We're being a little cheap these days, thanks to the aftermath of
You're
COVID.
being wise,
Uh,
not cheap,
yes,
wise.
wise, yes. No, so for
Yeah.
everyone who's on this call, Nidhi is amazing. I had a chance to meet her at a get together that Twitter had organized a while ago. Obviously, she has decades of experience under her belt. She's had a chance to work with some of the biggest companies. And I think what makes Nidhi's experience super fascinating is the fact that she's worked predominantly with in a B2B lens. But businesses are customers as well, right? Businesses are consumers as well. And the goal today is that all of you guys, through her experience, have a chance to think through and learn about how to set the right marketing strategy, how to think in first principles, especially when it comes to marketing. People think marketing is equal to an Instagram post. Guys, it's not. There are nuances and there are layers to it. I think what I'd also, love to do to sort of, kick things off is maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. Obviously, I know, your most recent experience at Microsoft, which is how we guys started chatting. But if you could maybe tell all of us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So thank you once again for having me, Suchita. So a quick summary of my journey. Actually, instead of, I'm sure everybody can go on LinkedIn and look at it, but I would actually talk about what were some of the interventions that helped shape my journey, so that it will also help address maybe some of the questions that people have and maybe get some more questions from people. So I started my career with an agency, and I had the marquee brands. I was lucky enough to get some of those marquee brands handed over to me to manage. Started my job in communications and then moved to marketing. Set up the analyst practice and the marketing practice for the agency. And when I started out, and this is something I learned in my first job, so there were like 4 things that we used to think about. The first one being look forward to coming to work. And these principles have sort of stayed with me. And I think it's extremely important that you love what you do and you're passionate about what you do and the people that you work with. That's what matters at the end of the day. You have to look forward to coming to work. The second one was, how do you think customer first? So a lot of times, when things are not going well for us, one tends to kind of blame external factors, and sometimes it is external factors. But do you really know your customer and understand your customer? I think that is extremely important. The third one was that how do you go about forming a relationship with the client or the customer at the other side of the table. So we used to say that India is a relationship driven economy. It is. People do business with people they like. You wouldn't get into business, and when you're going out there and selling, nobody is buying the product really. People are buying the passion of the person who's sitting across the table, the authenticity of that brand or the passion that they bring to the table. So I think those were some of the principles that kind of I have lived by, and I learned them in my first job. And then I got the opportunity to move on the corporate side, where I worked with some of the brands. They were MNCs, but we were always catering to the small business, the small guy, and startups. So that's what I did for a few years, and then got the opportunity to work with GoDaddy. They were setting up operations in India, and having worked with startups in that sense in my previous role at VeriSign, I was really excited to take the GoDaddy opportunity because that was like a startup. They were setting up shop in India, although it was a known brand globally, but known for not the right reasons perhaps. So we had to build the brand from scratch. And then also, of course, we took it to a level where we had 1 million paid SMB customers. So which was like a
which is,
big achievement.
yeah, that's
That was
incredible.
fantastic. It was, and we did a lot of stuff. We failed a lot. We learned a lot. So that was a fantastic experience. And yeah, and
Yeah.
then I moved to
Actually,
Microsoft.
I'm gonna call out all the sales people because there are a bunch of my colleagues from the sales team who joined the call. Guys, 1 million paying customers, right? That is what we need to aspire to do at LBB. 1 million paying customers. That's 10 lakh customers. That's no joke. But that's incredible, and we'll get into that in just a bit.
So yeah, so that's in a nutshell the journey that I've been in. And right now I'm at Microsoft, really excited to be in this role as well. We're trying to do a lot of new things. In fact, there's a Forbes article that has just come out on the COO, where we're talking about how Microsoft India is looking at catering to organizations of all size irrespective. So I'll send that out to you later.
Interesting. Awesome.
Yeah.
So I want to start with the point that you brought up, right, which is thinking of marketing in first principles. I know a lot of the companies that you work with, you've especially off late, you've done a lot of customer acquisition on the business side, where your customer isn't a user of a consumer app or whatever, but your customer is paying business. So a lot of work on merchant acquisition. What are the things that you think translate across customers, no matter who your user is, right? Whether your
Right,
user is, someone who needs to watch Hotstar, or your user is someone who will pay
yeah,
X rupees for GoDaddy annual package.
right,
What are those principles? That customer first is one, and obviously
right,
we've all heard Jeff Bezos say this over and over again, right?
correct.
But what does customer first really mean?
So, how I would like to translate that for everyone. At least that's how there's no right or wrong, right? You need to understand your customer. So it's more about, do you really know who your customer is? Is it Mrs. Khurana sitting in Dehradun, or
Mm,
is it Suchita at LBB, or is it Nidhi at Microsoft? Or it could be anyone. Or is
mm,
it my grandmom, right? So do you really know who your customer is? So segment the customer profile. And a lot of times, smaller organizations tend to lose focus and say that, oh, you know what? I should just go out there and just go for customer acquisition. One needs to be very
mm,
careful about what is the goal that you're defining for the business. Is it acquisition or retention? One has to come
Got it.
before the other. And then, of course, retention is important, especially like in today's time, retention is more important. So you need to adapt as
Yeah.
well. But what is the primary goal that you're going after? So when I say know your customer, it's more about understanding who it is. Then,
Mm,
secondly, what do they really need? Are you selling something that the customer doesn't really need? Um,
mm,
um, what are their aspirations? Where do
mm.
you as a brand fit in their journey?
Got
Do
it.
you really, what is the purpose of your brand, and how you can make the customer believe in your purpose? Like your example,
Got it.
you talk about shop small, you talk about, we are with you as a small business, right? But you're
Mm.
bringing it to life with that gift program. I missed the first 50 DM component of it, but I am going to go ahead and hold you to it. So,
Got it.
you have to have a purpose, define
Mm.
that purpose, make sure that your purpose is resonating with the customer, and then you provide proof to your purpose. You don't just say stuff for the sake of saying it. You have to make sure that you stand by it. So understand the customer's
Got it.
journey, where they are in their journey and where all can you be a part of their journey. It's not about you, it's about the customer.
Got it. So, if we could maybe, because I know a bunch of the folks on the call, are business owners themselves, right? And they may
Mm-hmm.
be running a fashion brand or a
Yeah.
lifestyle brand.
Hmm.
How do you do that? Say, for example, in a category like lifestyle, where
Hmm.
the need creation may be a little bit more artificial than say, for instance, something like a GoDaddy, where, the
Right.
need to have a that is being echo chambered by 20 other sort of, touch points, whether it's, Google's SEO, or how do you
Mm-hmm.
advertise, or where do you drive traffic to, unless you don't have a website. So
Mm-hmm.
how does one how does one answer that question when you're perhaps a lifestyle brand and what you're creating may not necessarily be a want, may not necessarily be a need, but actually, play to the desires of the customer.
Right,
So, how do you create missions around that?
right. So, first I'll go back to the GoDaddy example. The need has to be created a lot of times. So when we started GoDaddy, we were a very small team. I was the second person after the CEO who was hired. And what we realized was the need for a website did not exist. We were selling a product for 99 rupees. But a small business owner would spend 200 rupees on coffee, but they will not buy a name for 99 rupees because they don't see the value in it. So we had to create that need. So a lot of time the need has to be created. It could be dormant. You need to just bring it up, right? Make them realize that they need it. In the case of a lifestyle brand, I think there's one brand that I personally resonates very well with me. Actually, there are a few. I'll take the global and Indian example. So Dove, right? There's no, I mean, you could say that the need for a moisturizing soap is not really, it's superficial or not. It's like a luxury, right? Even the price is such. But the approach that Dove takes to talking about inner beauty, you all must have seen in the time of COVID, Dove came back with the nurses and the doctors and the masks that they wear and how the lines are left on their faces. So, that is one example of where you're going after the purpose and not necessarily creating the need, but you're making the purpose so strong that the individual will get attracted towards the brand.
Got it.
In the case of a lot of sustainable brands, everyone realizes that we need to use sustainable brands, but again, it's not like everyone is out there making money. So again, you making education becomes a very key component of that need creation.
Got it.
So like Happy Turtle, some of these brands are trying to do that, right? Sustainable fashion. So you need to find that purpose and then make sure that you're educating the customer by developing that need.
Got it. There's. I remember when you and I had met, and I was picking your brain on how to think about LBB sort of sales strategy and sales infrastructure, right? You had brought up, this point about how any marketing goal needs to be tied very closely with a business goal, and sometimes with marketing, right? It's not the ratio isn't all 1:1. So taking the example of Dove, right? You're creating this beautiful message, but it's not necessarily that message in itself will manifest in sales. So when you going back to the question of these principles of marketing, how would you divide up a marketing strategy in a way where you're ensuring that no matter what you're doing, it ties in with a business goal? And also, what are the kind of metrics that a young entrepreneur on this call, or even folks like myself, should be looking at when thinking through where they're spending money when it comes to marketing? So, for example, education. Educating your customer may not lead to a sale, right? Of course. But the LTV for education is like phenomenal, and one could even make that argument for content marketing. So, could you talk about that?
Right. Sure. So from a strategy or an approach perspective, this is one of the things I learned actually fairly recently in my career at GoDaddy, which is about 6-8 years ago. There has to be a shared mission. You have to be aligned together from stage one itself. So what is the business objective? What is the business that you've set up? What does it exist for? Are you, like I said, customer acquisition and you don't really care about the value and how much you spend deep pockets, or customer retention? Or it could be something as simple as, hey, X amount of revenue. Each and every business unit, sales is one unit, marketing is another unit. Everyone needs to rally behind that mission and that goal. So the goal has to be shared. Otherwise, people will be working in silos and nobody is accountable for anything. Right? So, because sales will always point at marketing and marketing will always point at sales. So you need to make sure that you're tied at the hip. I can give an example of how we went about the shared goal and knowing of the customer that you asked me earlier, Suchita. at GoDaddy, what we did when we started out, before doing anything, we actually went door to door in Delhi, Mumbai, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Chennai, in the metros, because we were coming with the assumption that we need to crack the metros first. So we said, okay, that should be easy, right? Not realizing that everybody was on Facebook at that time. So people did not feel the need for a website. So we went door to door, Karol Bagh, Sarojini Nagar, talking to the lower parade, talking to the smallest of shop owners and asking them as to, here is a product for 599 rupees, 600 rupees. Would you like to buy it? And all we got was, get out of here. No way, right? So that also helped me adjust the price. But then we kept going, and then we realized it's not a price conversation. And then we gave it a spin off. By the time you finish your cup of coffee, we will build a site. So while this campaign, and on the spot, we made that site in like 15 minutes while one person engaged in the conversation with the business owner. Another guy sat and used one of the automated tools and made a site. So this got a lot of PR and visibility and all of that. We called it the Cup of Coffee campaign. But truly speaking, it was one of the biggest failures because it was such a, like you said, it was a need creation. So I was not really getting revenue because the amount of money I spent in people's time in going and sitting across the table, making a website, knocking on doors, traveling, it just, it was not worth it. But the insights it gave us held us true to get to that 1 million mark. We realized that we have to operate at scale. We realized that we cannot do this door to door. But at the same time, it gave me those customer insights I would have never got on the phone or by talking to two people.
Got it.
So, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So that's one great example. Could you maybe give us other examples of, tactile ways? There's, obviously GoDaddy is a large company, Microsoft is a large company. You guys have budgets to work with, right? But if one is a young entrepreneur, if one still hasn't wrapped their head around, what product market fit for them looks like, what are the more agile tactics that you think, someone can sort of put in place to understand this customer well? Because you're totally right. If that isn't sorted out, anything else that you do will come crumbling down.
Correct. Like I said, identify who the type of profile you want to go after. And to begin with, just do very focused outreach through the various social platforms. Just try and understand what gets them going. Just try and understand their sweet spots, their pain points. That will help you arrive at how you approach your marketing. On one hand, talking about don't use plastic, but then, I saw a brand which is making shoes out of plastic. I want to go ahead and buy those shoes. So I'm all about organic and sustainability, so that resonates with me. Whereas maybe my friends probably don't relate to it, so it just depends on who you're talking to. You need to understand, go after in a very focused manner. Don't spend money on it because, like I said, we could do it in the other organization because, like you said, we had the resources, but even then it was a failure. I could not justify the time and amount of money we spent. I mean, I went back and said, hey, see, we did that. That's why we got the 1 million. But truly speaking, those 12 months were really painful for me because all I had to do was justify as to why that happened. And it was one of the biggest failures that I learned from. So go in a small manner. Even things like search, etc., it costs a lot of money, SEM. And your audience profile has to be in one platform or location, or identify that and then just go after it.
Got it. And I think a related question to this is, even when you think of channels, right? Obviously, you have your lowest common denominators, which is just tap into SEO, build some momentum on an Instagram or a Facebook, get recommended on LBB, and see some organic traction come your way. So I know those are like the lowest hanging fruits that a brand can sort of tap into. But what happens when a brand's figured out their 0 to 1? Now they're trying to get from 1 to 100, right? And they're trying to create some momentum around their brand. what are the channels that you found to be extremely effective, specifically with customer acquisition? And just generally, what are the tools that you think, especially from a measurement perspective, what are the tools that you think folks on this call should make a note of, so that they know what the ROI on their marketing spend is?
Sure. So let me talk about the first part of the question, which is the tactics first. Even in large organizations, we've seen that at the end of the day, word of mouth or customer evidence, as we call it, works the best. So customer evidence, and then you can blast it through whichever platform. Integrate customer evidence in your content marketing, so that it pops up in SEO, pops up on social platforms. So that is one critical component. And a lot of people don't really utilize PR the way they should. It is not seen as a strategic tool by a lot of organizations or by a lot of individuals. I think that needs to happen. So if Suchita is talking about a particular store somewhere, or Suchita is talking about serendipity, it makes me want to go to serendipity and check it out. Suchita outside of LBB, so you need to identify some of those influencers and make sure you have a strong influencer strategy as well as a strong customer evidence approach. So those are low cost but very highly effective mediums. And of course, if you go after big celeb influencers, then you have to spend money. But I'm just talking about when somebody is trying to go from 1 to 100 and not really from a 1 to a million straight away. Baby steps. Very important. You'll learn from it. And in terms of ROI, there's something we've followed, which is, and I still try and follow that as much as possible. The customer acquisition cost to the lifetime value that you get from a customer. Lifetime value could be measured as, let's say, 13 months, provided you're selling a 1-year product. So let's say you have an annual subscription-based model. So 13 months, a lot of your renewals would have happened or not happened. By the 12th month, you would have lost the customers. So we look at the 13-month value in the subscription business case, 13th month value of a customer. So we call it the lifetime value. Now, the customer acquisition cost to lifetime value, that ratio should be 1:3.
Got it.
If you're at 1:3, you're in a good place.
Got it.
And that's what you should try and get to. Then there are some other metrics and tools that exist. You could search for them online, or I'm happy to help people outside of the call as well. The time to return on investment. Like in the 0th month, in the first month that you acquired the customer, how much value were you able to get from that customer in the first month itself? So let's say I spend 100 rupees in acquiring one customer on my portal or for my product. If I spend 100 rupees, how much did the customer pay me back in the first 30 days, essentially, in the 0th month? Because that also, if it's at about 40% and above, you're in a good place. You're in a very good place. So that's how you should try and get there.
Got it. And any channels per se that you found, fairly interesting to tap into? So, like I'll give you an example, right? In LBB's case, WhatsApp has been the single most interesting channel for user acquisition.
Right.
On merchant acquisition, actually, content creation and content marketing has been the single best, generator of leads from a merchant acquisition perspective.
Right.
So, any particular channel that's really caught your eye? It's Quora for some, Pinterest for the others.
So I wouldn't want everyone to fall into, I call it a trap, because what happens is we try and think channel first. Again, here's where you come back and say, think customer first. Where is your customer? If your customer is sitting on Instagram and that's where they are, then so be it. Then that's your channel. If your customer is spread across, then you have to spread yourselves thin as well. But then again, focus, because the budgets would be limited. If you know that your customers, 70% usage is on WhatsApp, or let's say are mostly Apple users, then that's where you would go. In some other case, it could be Android. So think customer first, where he or she is, and not really which channel works, because there's no single paintbrush that you can apply to everybody.
Got it. No, that's actually super fascinating because I think, especially younger companies, and we made this mistake earlier also, you're always optimizing for a low customer acquisition cost,
Mm.
right? And the problem is in those scenarios, you end up compromising on your channel. And what ends up happening 6 months later is your leaky bucket where that
Correct.
customer that you acquired in one has said Tata bye bye because they came through a shitty channel.
So actually, I must tell you that in one of the organizations, a significant chunk of our customers were coming from SEM, but the end month value, so there is a direct correlation in the first month revenue that we get, and then the LTV as well. And the
Right.
channel, you also have to see your LTV by channel, your lifetime value. So the customer, like you pointed out, the customer that's coming from, let's say, channel X, may be giving you the least amount of revenue even in the 13th month. So you really need to think about, are you going for volume? And that is why maybe that's the approach. If you're into a market share game, you're saying, I don't care. I want 100,000 customers in the first 2 years. Then maybe you do want to go for that shitty channel
Got it.
because you're focused right now on market share. But
Yeah.
the moment it comes to profitability, yes.
Got it. Sorry, you were saying, but the moment it comes to profitability,
So I was just saying that the moment it comes to profitability, that's where you
mm,
actually say, okay, now I really need to revisit where I want
mm,
to put in more effort because the amount of money I'm spending on, let's say SEM, but my
mm,
lifetime value is the lowest, maybe I need to spend more money on, let's say, display because the lifetime value of that customer is actually better. And also,
got,
I can attack a repeat customer on that channel. Whereas on SEM, my repeat customer outreach is sort of limited.
got it, got it. No, it's super interesting because this goes back to the first point that you made, right? That you need to figure out, are you in the business of acquisition or are you in the business of retention? And just taking a call on that helps you sort of determine what the next layers of your funnel need to be.
Right. And one of the things that you asked, I don't know if I addressed that, which is on a successful marketing strategy. Think of it in two ways. Number one, define what defines success for you. What is success?
Mm,
And that will give you a lot of
mm,
your answers. And that's when you rally the entire organization behind that success, whether it's sales,
mm,
marketing, it doesn't matter what. And the
mm.
second one is when we're talking about know your customer, it should actually be a customer engagement strategy and not a marketing strategy.
Got it. What does that mean?
So, for instance, in customer engagement, like I shared with you, where is customer in their journey,
Mm,
right? And where can I plug myself in?
got it.
So, if someone is looking to buy a new car, are they looking for it and they search for it on the phone?
Mm,
Then maybe on the phone is where I need to reach out to that customer
mm, mm.
because I have an overlap with the person who's buying the car and who's buying my product.
Got
So
it.
where is the customer is where you need to be and not where you are is where you want the customer, because pulling the customer to where you are is really tough. You've been able to do a fantastic job of it, Suchita, with LBB, but it is not easy. Bringing the customer to your
Yeah.
platform is the toughest thing to do.
Yeah. So, taking on exactly that example, right? If I'm a young brand, say selling peanut butter, should I also be looking at opening myself up to a Facebook marketplace, to an Amazon, because right now there's this whole sort of conversation about a lot of brands wanting to go direct to
Hmm.
consumer, right? To keep their margins
Yep.
intact, to keep their brand intact, to keep, their pricing strategy intact. How does one sort of find a strike a balance in between both, especially if you're a fledgling brand where you want that distribution, but you don't
Hmm.
want that distribution to bite you in the ass later because you don't have any of
Correct.
the data in terms of how that distribution took place in the first place. So how does one strike a balance there?
So let's say, what's it called? Happy jars. No, let's say, am I right? Yeah, yeah. So I'm a peanut butter brand.
Hmm.
Now, do I want to compete with a Skippy? Maybe not, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So that means that I am trying to play in a very niche game. Uh,
Hmm.
a very smallish segment is what I want to go after. So, which is why
Hmm.
I said, define what's success for you. Look at a
Hmm.
Blue Tokai, right? Blue Tokai has partnered with a lot of restaurants or places where they are also selling their coffee, cold brew, and beans and things like that. Because they figured out that, or let's say, Suchali's, again, sorry, this is a Delhi example. I'm sure people have logged in from everywhere, but Suchali, who does baking, she has partnered with the Blue Tokai. Because people who are coming to have coffee can see her croissant sitting there and they would like to have it. I mean, that's how then you crack your distribution. Is Suchali going out there and doing STM and competing with large, big brands or bakery houses? Probably not. Is she competing with even a Theobroma? Maybe not.
Got it. So figure out folks that are more complementary. Absolutely, figure out folks that are more complementary to your distribution than folks who can antagonize you in the long run.
Correct.
Understood. So if we could, maybe sort of shift gears, right? I think a lot of the questions that have come up have been around what does go-to-market mean, right? Everyone sort of, talks about, figuring out your product market fit. Where does a GTM strategy come in? What does it even entail? And if you could maybe give examples of, say, for example, something like a GoDaddy, which you launched from ground up. What was a GTM for a product like that? And what have been your key takeaways while building GTMs for, the biggest brands out there?
Okay. So GTM is from the perspective of, in terms of what does it entail? What is the product that you take out there? So for instance, I'll take the GoDaddy example. We had domain names, we had website, we had email. So what is the kind of bundle that I could make? Is it a domain plus email so that I replace a visiting card with a domain plus email type of bundle? Or is it a website? Do people really want a website? I mean, we're all questioning, right? So identifying the right product, identifying how will I take that product to market, which is, am I going to go direct? Am I going to go through alliances? In the case of Blue Tokai and Suchali, it's a form of alliance, right? Or Miam and Big Fat Sandwich. Again, sorry, Delhi example. So am I going after alliances? Am I going after large distribution mechanisms where I go through a partner model, depending on the scale that I want to take and the reach that I want? So that becomes how will I distribute my product? How will I make my product reach the person? And if I'm going direct, then, it's direct shipping through various platforms that exist. So some people go for a combination of various go-to-market, and some people go for, like, for instance, a GoDaddy would have a combination. Similarly, a VeriSign. VeriSign was actually not direct at all. It was always a partner-driven model. Microsoft has both models. So I think it just totally depends on, again, what is your business model? You define how do you take your product to the customer. And then what is the ROI that will make sense for you? So when you're going direct, you're taking an LTV to CAC ratio. But when you're going through a partner model, there are various elements that come into play. Like what you pointed out, there is the incentives that you come into play that you need to give to the partner. How much are you willing to spend on that? So go-to-market will cover the business aspect as well as the marketing aspect of it.
Got it. Understood. And is pricing also part of how one should think about? Got it. So all of it tax into your
all of it. So like, for instance, the Karol Bagh example that I was giving you, or the Lower Parel, where we went door to door, we were also testing the pricing strategy. There were obviously other ways of testing it as well, but, we just said, okay, let's just go out there and talk to the customer and see what price works for them. So you take that in.
That's super, because I think, given that we guys also engage with so many small brands, I think the one thing that I've sort of seen is a lot of small brands get their pricing wrong. And it's either because, like you said, they don't talk to customers enough. They don't test out their product enough. They don't sample their product enough. I studied econ, so my sort of, view on pricing is a little different. But what are the cues that, someone on this call should look at to know, is this the right price to sell my product? whether the product is a dress or the product is, in LBB's case, the advertising units or whatever else it is that we offer
Sure.
to our merchants. How do you figure out, at what price you should go to market, or at what price you should, sort of scream from the rooftop saying, I am here and I have arrived? Because
Right.
obviously, pulling back becomes tough, right?
Oh, yes.
Saying, whoop, I'm sorry, change my price now becomes a little tough.
Right. And also you can't be on perpetual sale.
Right.
Or because demand increase, you can't take your price up because then you're giving a wrong signal to the customer again, right? You're losing
Yeah.
their loyalty in a way. So again, here you would look at competition, depending on who you see yourself pitted against. Second, a lot of startups don't do it, especially the smaller startups. You should always have an advisory board. There are a lot of people who would do this pro bono to help startups. So have like an advisory board, a bunch of people who you can just bounce off your ideas with. Because a lot of times, because you're so close to your idea, you might miss out on the bigger picture, or you might want somebody who's a little less passionate and is removed from your situation. So that is another. Market testing is very important. Before you go all out, do I want to compete with a Chidia, or do you want to compete with another clothing, or with a, give me another one,
like
one of those. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who are you competing against, and then what are they pricing themselves at? So I think you should keep those factors in mind and do a little test. So this is again something we learned, I learned in the last 2 organizations I was with. We used to call it test, learn, scale. You have to test, you have to learn, and then you scale out. Just don't go all out. Because the test that you would do with 10, 20 people, you can always change your pricing and move it about. But if you've already gone out to hundreds, too late. I mean, you can always change it. It's not never too late, but it just kind of puts you in a position where you're disappointed with yourself more than anything else.
Yeah, and also your price determines whether you need to have an acquisition strategy or a retention strategy.
Correct. Correct.
I mean, your margins coming from your price, right? So
that's
all
right.
of it is fairly correlated.
All of it comes into play. Yes, that's right. So like, for instance, if you're in the acquisition game and you're saying, I'm a late entrant in this market, but I do have a certain amount of funds that I can put behind acquisition, and first few years, I don't care about profitability, then sure, go all out. You price yourself at a lower price point, better quality product, etc. But do remember that after those 2 or 3 years, once the acquisition has played out and you want to increase your profitability, then you have to get more money from the same customer. Retaining a customer retaining a customer in today's time is tricky. Or repeat customer, like a lot of them are not subscription businesses, so let's not say retention, but more about repeat customer purchase.
Got it. No, and that's true, because I think a lot of folks forget that also requires money.
Yes.
Your marketing spend can't only be on top of the funnel, but you need to figure out what happens after conversion. We've got a bajillion questions, and I just want to let you know that we have been talking non-stop for about 35 minutes, Nidhi.
Are you kidding me?
Yes.
Suchita, I know. Just for everyone's context, I was telling Suchita, I don't have that much to share. I don't know what you're going to do for 45 minutes. Okay, there you go. You win.
No, so and I have like a bajillion more questions for you, but I want to sort of play on this super important part of thinking about how to retain your customer, right? In so many cases, customer delight isn't necessarily about being the quickest to take new products out to market. So example, in the case of Uniqlo, for instance, their whole, or in H&M, right? Their whole sort of life cycle is built on how frequently they can give more products to customers. But in a lot of other cases, it's about consistency, right? Like Happy Jar or Pigamia. I just want to ensure that yoga has good the next time I buy it.
That's right.
What are the best practices that you sort of seen businesses and brands do specifically when it comes to customer retention? And what are the elements of delight that can be created, with customers, even if I don't have any money, but I want to make sure that that user comes back to me?
Right. I'll be a little cautious of the word delight. So one of our friends in the restaurant business actually said that it's not so much about, and I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people who own restaurants, and I know a lot of chefs. I mean, they would totally disagree, but this person was a business person. Okay, he was not the person behind in the kitchen. So he said for him the priority was delivering a consistent experience. Now, whether that experience is a 6 on 10 or a 9 on 10, as long as it's a consistent experience, repeat customer happens. Because customer comes with that expectation. So it's all about meeting that expectation. Because a lot of times we get so consumed by the delight that it kind of, it just creates a little more stress on the business, really. So because how much can you bend backwards to delight the customer? There's only so much you can do, so there should be a threshold. As long as you're meeting your threshold, you're in business. Now looking at the repeat customer, so there are some channels which I have found that have been most useful in getting repeat customers. The Google Display Network, display advertising. But again, that requires a significant amount of spend. You can't start with, so I'm not sure how much of that can you do. So it's more about locking that experience. Like, how do I stay top of mind? I was reading the Burger King Global CMO article in Brand Equity yesterday, whenever that happened. A really good article. How are you more relevant in today's times? And make your conversations contextual, and that's where content marketing comes in. Don't make it about, it's not about gimmicks, it's not about, of course, depending on, you want a sale, of course, that's, you have goals to meet, you have to do that, fair enough. But then remain contextual and relevant for the customer. That's the only way you can keep getting that customer back at low cost. Of course, like I said, if you have the money, there are advertising mediums which are best suited. You can do a lot of retargeting and get that customer. But if you have limited resources, then I would say rely on content marketing.
Got it. Which is fascinating, because I think a lot of folks don't, especially folks who have low budgets, right? And we made this mistake at LBB as well. You don't realize the shelf life of assets. Shelf life of an ad expires once a customer clicks, right? But the shelf life of things, like you said, like content, processes that create consistency, those last a lifetime. And I know we have limited time, but I want to squeeze in this question for sure, which is, processes are so important. Once you've sort of figured out your GTM, once your product is out in market, you've got your distribution in place, you figured out your channel mix. Could you talk a little bit about, best practices around processes that must be put in place if you want to go from 100 to 1 million?
Oh, I thought you were going to say 1 to 100. Okay, so 100 to 1 million. Yeah, think big. So 100 to 1 million, processes become extremely critical. You have to templatize your approach as much as you can. You have to have them as engines that are working in the background, versus you having to create something. Again, a creative person would be cringing at this, but creating something new every time is a drain of resources. How do you templatize your approach? You've got something that worked for you. How do you keep bringing it back? There is a reason why people, especially in the US, have a Black Friday sale, because they've figured out that there is a particular, and also I send out an email at 2 p.m. on a Friday gets me better returns versus a 5 p.m. on a Friday or a 8 a.m. on a Thursday. So you have to find the formula, so to speak, basis historical data of what you have done, which is why I said test, learn, and scale. The moment you go from 100 to a million, those are the kind of things that we did. We cracked the model of scale. What works? If it works, just go out there and do more of it. And if it doesn't, shut it down.
Got it.
If it doesn't work, shut it
Got
down, because you have limited resources. You cannot go out there and keep spending money on something.
Got it. And a question actually just came up, which is related to this, right? What happens when the geography changes? So with a lot of the, with a lot of brands, they may start out in a particular geography, right? But the process, that it takes to crack a market, and we actually saw this with LBB as well, where what a Delhi customer consumes is actually very different from what a Bombay or a Bangalore customer, ends up tapping into. So how do you think of process in a way where, where, like you said, there's some scalability to it? So the same way, you mentioned first principle as being customer first. What are the first principles when it comes to setting up a process which is, demographic proof, region proof, geography proof, etc.?
That's actually a great way to optimize your spend. You can do geofencing on mobile advertising. Even a lot of platforms like YouTube, you can do geo-targeting. Even on search, you can do geo-targeting. So any platform today, you can actually do most of the platforms. I don't know about any, but most of the platforms, you can select the geographies you want to go after. So we used to do, I used to manage, in one of my previous roles from India, I used to manage China and the rest of the Asian markets. So if you look at the same example, when I was going out there, I was making sure if I was advertising in those markets, and within China, I figured out, okay, here are the, let me take another example. Within Indonesia, I figured out, okay, these are the only 2 cities where my business is coming from. Why will I go out there and advertise all over? Similarly, you would know, okay, I'm going after these 10 markets. So look at your current base, see where it's coming from, do customer evidence from those regions, and spread the word in that region itself.
Got it.
Get volume going. Once you've reached, so, like adopt a city or adopt a state model, reach a certain scale, and then you will be able to figure out the formula, so to speak, because that will vary by category and by brand. And then you just replicate it across the other states or cities.
Got it. But test till you figure that out.
Correct. Do small, quick tests, because agility is also very important. You don't want to spend a whole year just testing.
Absolutely. This was fantastic. I had a bunch of other questions, but I know we're tight on time. I actually want to do a quick, 2 quick questions for you. One is, there are a lot of women who are, on this. A lot of my female colleagues are on this as well. You've obviously had a fantastic career. What is the one, what's the one feedback that you would give to, to women who are starting up, who are, executives in high-flying jobs or working at startups? How do you stay in the game? Because you've stayed in the game and you've kicked ass at it.
Thank you. Still working on it. But I would say the self-belief. As women, we are very critical of ourselves. I think you and I had this conversation sometime back at one of the forums where we met. We tend to be overcritical of ourselves. I think the self-belief and telling yourself that I am remarkable is something that would go a long way. Don't wait for the validation.
Got it. And a totally unrelated question, but because you've told us so much about all things marketing, GTM, and channels, what do you read? Who are the people who you follow? Who are the marketers who inspire you, and who should everyone on this call be checking out as soon as this call's over?
I'm such a terrible. This is a terrible question because I have such a short attention span. So I read a lot of Blinkist because they give me the summary. I'm like, okay, I'm done with the book. And then at any given point of time, I read a lot of fiction. At any given point of time, I'm reading 3 books, not finishing any. So I would go from the Happiness Project, which is like a I forget the author's name, but from the Happiness Project to a book by Ellen to Lean In to Satya Nadella's Hit Refresh. So I have like right now I'm reading 4 books. I'm not
Got
finishing
it.
either of them. So in terms of who do I follow, I actually look at a lot of work that happens from some of the brands like Under Armour, Dove. Burger King has started doing a lot of interesting stuff in
Yeah.
the last year or year and a half. So I
Yeah.
follow a lot of that stuff some of these large brands are doing. It's not like I can apply it to my job, but just keeps you, it just inspires you.
Correct.
And, just to kind of know what's going on. And some of the stuff that some of the local Indian sustainable brands are also doing, like the kind of work that Nicobar has put out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's just a lot that we can learn from these brands in how they're thinking about it. It just keeps you motivated.
Got it. And last question. Obviously, nothing is possible without a great team, right? What are your first principles when it comes to hiring, structuring teams, and also building teams? It's funny, I was going through your LinkedIn, and you have so many people who've like sent you love letters on LinkedIn saying Nidhi is the best manager, best boss. I have learned so much under her. So I'm going to squeeze that question in
I
as well,
paid
which is
them.
uh, I hope the CAC to LTV ratio was as per desire. No, but what does it take to build a rock solid team? What are your first principles when it comes to keeping teams engaged?
So I think it's also at the time of hiring. At the time of hiring, one of the
Hmm.
things that I would look for is, people do business with people they like. So is there like a connection that one has?
Hmm.
While keeping in mind diversity, I don't want replicas of me coming into this team. It's more
Hmm.
about I have certain weaknesses. Does that person have that strength so that we complement each other?
Got it.
That is the first thing, keeping that diversity in mind, diversity in
Hmm.
whatever form.
Hmm.
Then the second thing I would say is whether a whether a person has a, this is something we see at Microsoft, which is you should read Hit Refresh, Suchita. It's a great book. All of you should. You have, yeah.
Yeah.
So Satya Nadella talks about the growth mindset, right? Whether the
Hmm.
person is know it all or is the person learn it all. Are you learning
Hmm.
something new every day? It could be attending a
Hmm.
webinar, getting one sentence from somebody. It doesn't matter. I thrive on people interaction. And I have this little OneNote that I've created where I'm making that one statement I keep taking from my interactions and keep adding it here and use it whenever, you know. So I think the growth mindset, the learn it all mindset versus the know it all. And the last thing I would say is that make your team succeed. How do you make sure if they win, you win,
Hmm.
and if they don't, you don't. You just have to make
Hmm.
sure do what's right by people, and the
Hmm.
rest will follow. You do right by them, they will do right for you, for the business, and for everything else. But first,
Hmm.
think of them, because organizations will come and go. I mean, rather, organizations will find people that will come and go, but those
Yeah.
people will remember you and your interaction with them.
Absolutely. No, this was awesome. A quick recap for everyone, who's on the call. Everything from what does it mean to be customer first, thinking of your business as do you have an acquisition strategy or a retention strategy? That was actually one of my favorite takeaways. Don't go channel first, go customers first. So wherever your customers are, tap into that and find them. Thinking of customer engagement is also extremely critical, which Nidhi had brought up. I also, just a quick call out to everyone who's on this call, because I've spoken to Nidhi about this before, that LTV to CAC ratio is super important. So if you're spending 1 rupee on acquiring a user, you need to make sure that over the lifetime of that user, you make an ROI of at least 3. I know that was potentially specific to subscription businesses, but to everyone who's on this call, everyone who's running their own business, figure out what the LTV to CAC ratio needs to be for your industry, and keep that as your gold standard, so you don't lose focus. And most importantly, hire people who are learn it all and not know it all. I'm gonna put that up
That's not
in
me. That's
LBB's
Satya.
office. That's Satya. Yeah. No, but I think that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
No, thank
45 minutes,
you.
incredible. There are a bajillion, comments and queries coming my way. I may send some of them to you, and everyone who's asked these questions, we'll make sure that we get back to you with a response and an answer. I've already eaten up, enough of Nidhi's time. Thank you so much. This was
No,
amazing.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And please do share with me the feedback, good, bad, ugly, everything, as well as the
Everyone
questions.
is
Okay, so any questions as well, more than happy to answer them over the next few days. And thank you for
absolutely.
having me here, Suchita. All the best, and thanks to LBB.
Yes, stay safe. See you, Nidhi. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone. Thanks.